Well, Tara, we're so excited to have you on here to the Belker podcast. I know after having known you for 10 years, initially as one of my mentors as a Cornell alum and myself having been an undergrad, really excited to hear more about your journey from scientist to general manager and now CEO co-founder. So we met initially during your 14-year stint at J&J, where you're an R&D scientist turned marketing leader. And now you've launched Dig Labs. So how's life on the other side, running a tech company?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I can't believe that we've known each other for 10 years. It has certainly flown by. Life on the other side is fascinating. I have to say that having a 14-year career at Johnson & Johnson, as you mentioned, having experience both in research development as well as brand management and external innovation and strategic partnerships really set me up for success in managing so many different aspects of a business, especially a technology-focused business. So anything from vetting new technologies to understanding how to form a team, managing a P&L from the bottom up and the top down, as well as managing our investors. The J&J experience has really been pivotal to that. And I think the cherry on top for me was really having my last stint at Johnson & Johnson be focusing on strategic external innovation, where we partnered very closely with startups across the health technology continuum to understand if we could collaborate with them or invest in their ideas and de-risk them to a point where Johnson & Johnson can make a better decision on whether or not they'd want to invest or purchase those types of companies. So for me, I can't say enough good things about my corporate career. While it didn't arm me for everything, it certainly set me up to be on this startup journey for 3 years now.
That's really exciting. And so J&J, I know, is one of the most massive companies. So in terms of where you played specifically and sat within the group, I obviously know a little bit from spending some time there by function of you helping to secure my internship when I was 21. But now at this point, I would love to get a sense for what was your journey? Like, were you truly working as a lab scientist when you started there post Cornell, and then kind of how did you navigate through all of that?
Yeah. So to get started on that story, maybe I can start in college, actually. I was a material scientist and a biomedical engineer by training at Cornell. And apparently we are all Cornell alums. So that's super cool. At Cornell, I did some deep research in the chemical biology department on nanotechnology, actually making pH sensors that would change color depending on the pH of cancer cells, which is super cool because you can't stick a probe in a cancer cell and measure the pH. So by visualizing the pH, we were able to help the oncology department really develop better chemotherapies and think about other cancer treatments. And that really inspired me, in terms of thinking about how I could fast track my experiences in healthcare and health technology. I personally didn't have the appetite to spend another 5 to 7 years doing a PhD. And I felt like real world experience would be really important for me, given how I tended to be more of a generalist anyway. So my first approach to that was Johnson & Johnson. I was able to land an internship in the consumer division. J&J has 3 verticals: consumer, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals. And in fact, the consumer division is spinning out into its own publicly traded company, which is going to be called Kenvue, which is super, super exciting. The entire tenure of my J&J career has been in the consumer sector. I started as a scientist working on products ranging from sanitary protection all the way up through anti-aging skincare. And in those 6 years, the red thread throughout my career was really around helping to visualize results. So in skincare, I worked on making claims around years younger for the appearance of skin. In sanitary protection, I have patents around helping to visualize absorbency to provide better protection for women's healthcare products. And actually about halfway through my journey at J&J, so maybe about 5 years in, I was doing a lot of existential career decision making. I realized that I loved the science, but I really wanted to understand how to draw that through to commercialization. I also really love the idea of commercializing technology and monetizing technology. And how does technology get monetized? What are the triggers? Obviously, intellectual property is a huge way to monetize technology. I looked into becoming a patent attorney. Fun fact, I am actually a patent agent, which means I passed the patent bar. But I realized I do not want to be a lawyer.
You passed the bar in your spare time, if I remember.
Spare time, yeah. It was one of my development assignments, if you will, that I gave myself, because I was really candidly a little frustrated with kind of the limitations of having a career only in R&D. So by process of elimination, I ended up going back to business school. I had an amazing mentor from the business development function, because again, I was really interested in translating science into monetary value. And he said, if that's what you're interested in, you should really go run a business first. So then you understand how to actually interact on transactions related to businesses and technologies. I thought, wow, that's a really, really great idea. So I went back to business school. I went to NYU Stern School of Business part-time. And at the same time, I made the transition into brand management in the consumer organization. So I managed brands like Rogan, Neosporin, and then ultimately Aveeno in the United States. And I did that across 6 years. I also got married and had my son during that time. So it was a very special time. But I realized in that experience that I really missed the science. So I think what emerged was this love for general management, and realizing that at such a large company like Johnson & Johnson, getting true general management experience would have taken another 10 years of service, additionally international assignments to perhaps smaller regions where I could own more local market, which had cross-functional components like regulatory, quality, etc. Or I could leave and go start this idea that I had. And the idea was really inspired by all of my experience in human healthcare. I am a lifelong dog parent, pet lover, and I got so frustrated when I came to caring for my pets because they can't tell us what's wrong. Sometimes they're suffering in silence. We take them to the vet and we realize they've had a problem for months. And I just got really frustrated by that. And I thought, with all of what's happening in human healthcare, personalization, we all have mini DSLRs in our pocket now, which is our smartphones. There has to be a better way to care for these animals who give us so much love and who are literally a part of our lives. Like my first child was my dog. Her name was Sammy. So that kind of inspired me to think about taking all of this, career experience and knowledge in the human health tech side and figuring out if we could apply that to our pets. And that's when we left to start Dig Labs in 2019.
Wow.
Interesting. So I was reading through Dig Labs' website and was kind of looking at this unique, y'all have this fun fact that y'all kind of post. It's no one has looked at more dog poop than we have. And so that definitely hooked me into wanting to read more and understand more. Can you what at Dig Labs were y'all doing? Were y'all just looking at the health of dogs through that, and then you've kind of morphed into what you do now?
Yeah, it's a funny story. We actually started with a product, and we were really excited about supplementation in pet, specifically because 95 to 98% of pets eat dry kibble. And there didn't seem to be a huge movement at the time towards other types of food, like fresh food or prepared food, et cetera. Now, 3 years ago, that was true. I think today is different. But given that, we were really interested in figuring out how we could level up dogs' nutrition without having these huge behavior changes. And that's where personalized supplements came in to our field of view. We were really inspired by brands like Persona and Care Of in the human healthcare space. So we launched a product which is called PupSup. It was a personalized all-in-one supplement. Pet parents would take a quiz, highlight what they felt like their top concerns were for their pet. And we created an algorithm, and also we created the manufacturing and servicing of these personalized supplements. So we did that in 2019, 2020, and we realized that pet parents aren't as capable as we'd like them to be for telling us what's wrong with their pets to make the best supplements. And that's when we realized, what else could we do to help understand the pet's current baseline in order to make the best products or give the best advice, give the best recommendations. And that's when we realized the power of photos. So harkening back to all my experience in human health tech and research development, I naturally gravitated towards images. Obviously, there are a ton of laboratory tests that were available, and we were also very interested in those in the beginning, like microbiome tests, blood tests, stool tests, etc. But what we realized when we did the research was that they are time intensive, they're expensive, and candidly, we did not want to be in the business of being a laboratory services company. But we knew that this industry was ripe for disruption. So we said, what can pet parents do at home on demand to give them real-time insights that could help them customize products or get the right recommendations or even know if they should go to the vet? And that is what led us to Poop. Because as a pet parent, right, you know that you look at more of your dog's poop than any other poop. You're even more willing to touch your dog's poop than your own poop. It's a whole thing. So on top of that, we also realized that poop is kind of like this unsung hero of diagnostics, right? It's not like super sexy like microbiome tests or mouth swabs or blood work even, but there's so much information that can be gleaned from a visualization of stool. So we set out on this almost like a pet project at Dig to collect as many poop photos as we could. And we were convinced that if we looked at enough photos of poop, we could predict laboratory tests. So we were convinced that we could predict what a dog was eating based on associating the visualization of the stool with even microbiome markers, which are obviously a marker of diet and gastrointestinal health. We also thought that we could be able to predict the outcome of an intestinal parasite test. So every year you probably take your dog to the vet, you bring in a bag of poop and they tell you, oh, your dog has a parasite or they don't. Fun fact, actually 1 in 4 dogs have undetected intestinal parasites. Wow. And so we thought that could be a huge opportunity to address. So yes, we believe that no one's looked at more dog poop than we have. And what we're working on sort of under the hood are technologies that can really create these rapid scans for pet parents to detect whether or not they should go get a confirmatory test and make sure that they're taking action. Because again, it's so hard to detect sometimes. And if a pet isn't in an emergent situation, oftentimes pet parents don't notice.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Tara, because I actually have a friend who just recently had to take their dog to the vet because they were having all sorts of GI issues. And I'm even thinking about the amount they were telling me the amount that they had to write a check for. And it was painful, not to mention like emotional for them, right? That experience of not knowing and then going through all these considerations of maybe they have cancer. I mean, they're just the rabbit hole goes deep there on like all the potential reasons for that. So I think it's so interesting that this is something that people are increasingly interested in as more and more folks have dogs. And in my time on the health tech venture side, this exact space applied to humans has been hot for the last 3 years. Basically AI ML, where you get a data set, like your photos of stool, and train it to like tell you something. So
exactly. And just to build on what you're saying, I think the secret sauce at Dig is we've been able to functionalize historically small data sets. So in traditional AI and ML, you always hear you need 10,000, 100,000, a million images, right, to do something special. We believe that by pairing the right amount of images with the right expertise, we can functionalize images at very small scale relative to that. So I'm talking about 1,000 images. Ish. Wow. And then through advancements in AI, as well as through finding the right experts, that's the value that we bring to our enterprise partners, who we ironically enough attracted because they had pets who had issues. They were using our Dig Labs Health Check app, and they're like, well, I want this for babies. I want this for cat litter, etc. So our business model has essentially been flipped into a B2B2C model.
Wow.
where we build these types of experiences and solutions for either brands who have existing audiences who want to engage with them in a different way by unlocking this visual data as an experience, or even R&D organizations who are looking at better, different ways to characterize their product's performance or even their end users' actual experience with the product and bring it to life in the visual space in ways that they could never characterize before. We're building unique visual scales for them. We're able to characterize and quantify those scales to remove subjectivity of different graders. And we're really excited about that work. And I think, honestly, that's kind of where we're looking to double down on our business, is finding more partners who are interested in exploring how visual data and visual insights can be applied to their companies or to their users to provide these really, really engaging experiences.
So what was the outcome? So the pet check thing, what was it called? The health check app?
Health check, yes. So that app is still available on the App Store. It's free.
Nice.
So if you have a dog, you can download Dig Labs Health Check. Right now, we're using it as an internal sandbox to test new features, try out new visual models, and specifically using it to almost develop some of the capabilities that we expect our partners to want to consume in the future. So we're excited about using it for that case, and of course, helping dogs through it. I think the other insight that is probably obvious, but access to quality pet care is really expensive, and especially in certain areas of the country and definitely in other areas of the world, it is a luxury. It's not a right. So we're excited about also leveraging these types of technologies in those sorts of use cases where access to quality care is hard to come by.
Nice. And then, so you basically, maybe by accident, were able to start landing enterprise customers because of the technology that was powering, people sending in dog poop and you being able to actually make assessments on what's going on with your pet.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, I think that's also speaks to like the power of networking and the power of being connected with other folks at an industry level. So I was getting LinkedIn inbounds, from people who were like, hey, this technology is really cool. Can we chat about how I could use it for X or Y? And so I thought that was just fascinating for me and the company, because I didn't expect that to happen so quickly. We actually were expecting to build our Dig Labs ecosystem out much more thoroughly before attracting those kinds of partners. But given COVID and given the investment environment, we ended up following that revenue path, and we've been self-capitalized since November 2020.
Wow.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So people are using your app. You guys have been self-capitalized for over a year now, or 2 years now, and getting there. How are you landing that first enterprise customer? Like, I'm sure someone reached out to you and wanted to talk about, hey, is there a solution that we could use within our business? What type of company is that? Like, can you give us an example on, how that's being used?
Yeah, totally. So once the inbound happens, we typically set up a meeting to understand, what that specific client's goals are, what challenge they're facing and how they envisioned using it, if it wasn't inbound. Then we typically do an immersive session where we try and understand more about, and this is obviously under cover of an NDA and things like that. And it's often more like a consulting service that we provide, understanding what their company objectives are. And then we create a product roadmap for them in terms of how we could see not only this specific visual technology, but also thinking about with respect to that company's digital transformation goals and other kinds of objectives, how we would recommend architecting a roadmap for them that, this feature can sit in a broader product idea and a broader product vision.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then what we do is we co-develop that with them, or we can white label our existing solution if it makes sense. So depending on the size of the client and depending on their needs, we can either literally give them open API access to use our models and use our tools, and they can have their own web environments, their own infrastructure and stacks, or we can build that for them from the ground up. And we have different clients on different types of services. So we have clients ranging from like seed stage startups all the way up to Fortune 50 enterprises, leading baby care companies, pet nutrition companies, etc. And right now we're actually actively looking for a pet diagnostics and pet pharmaceutical partner to help advance the parasite work that we've done so far. Our strategy is generally around finding a partner of choice in a key vertical. To make sure that we have not only, the best in class access to those resources and the best chance of success for bringing to market, but it also allows us to have shared resources and continue to invest the revenue generated from those deals in enhancing our pipeline.
Gotcha. So for the listeners, I'm trying to simplify it for myself. It's you basically created a technology, and then these like AI, ML, being able to understand like different images and predict outcomes that come out from them. You apply it to pets and analyzing pet poop, which we know now, 3 years later, it's kind of obvious, but maybe it wasn't obvious back then when you started it, that, analyzing stool is something that we can be using to understand what's actually going on inside of our GI tracts and, second and third order effects that happen with the rest of the body. Then you realize that your model can be applied to other applications as well. You start getting inbound, and then now start to basically co-develop different products using this technology that you guys built. Am I right on that? Okay.
Yeah, that's an amazing synthesis and synopsis. And so even in pet, we're expanding beyond stool. So we just launched a collaboration with veterinary dental practices to work on ensuring dental health for dogs based on before and after photos. We're starting to work on skin and coat and other endpoints. And then, as mentioned, we have partners outside of pet as well. So it's been a really exciting journey, and our goal right now is to continue to expand to those adjacent verticals as discussed. We've even had conversations with some well-renowned human healthcare foundations to understand, as well as enterprises, to understand, what public policy and what public health priorities we should be focusing on, and how to find the right partners in those spaces as well. So if any listeners out there are at these companies or have a personal passion for visual diagnostics, definitely reach out, because we're very much in active landscaping mode for additional partnerships.
Wow.
Nice. And we definitely help with that.
Well, and Tara, I'm so interested in like a common thread for you. I mean, because we think about CEO profiles all the time, right? And like so many CEOs kind of like pride themselves on their ability to just lead and influence. But then there are others who really like have that, I'd say, rigor within the domain of expertise. And I feel like, and you're hitting on both those cylinders, right? That having that background, owning your own patents, and then also having that general management experience. And I feel like a common thread that I'm noticing is no matter where you were sitting, what department or title or job duties you had, you were networking kind of throughout your career, even dating back to the life on the hill at Cornell. Would you say that you kind of had this entrepreneurial itch from the very start, and that you noticed, hey, I'm not like a normal R&D person who like just thrives on, working with test tubes and spectrometers, but did you always kind of feel like you'd end up at this spot?
It's so funny you mentioned that, because actually, no, I didn't feel that at all. And I think part of it is because I never knew a lot about entrepreneurship when I was younger. So as a first generation college graduate, it was almost an obvious choice to me to be an engineer, because I felt like I had to get a job right out of college, being financially independent at a really young age. And so for me, the journey to entrepreneurship was more like oh, now that I finally feel like I'm financially independent, maybe I can think about what I actually want to do. And part of that happened at J&J, I would say, when I hit that like 5-6 year mark in R&D, and I was like, oh, there's so many different departments. Like I can have a million careers within this huge company, right? So that was sort of the first inflection point for me. And I was like, oh, let me venture out of R&D, which, you know, is a story in and of itself. And then that second big inflection point was like, how can I be the generalist that I want to be? And that like, I keep being pulled towards at such a big company. And for me, the answer became the timeliness of the idea that I had, which was, I felt like if I didn't go out and try to do this myself, someone else would, and I would kind of regret that idea. And then the other piece is I felt like it was not a one-way door, it was a two-way door. So I felt like I could give it 6 to 18 to 24 months and set up, you know, milestones and like very specific time boxed and financially boxed goals, which was in 3 months, we want to be able to show this. And if we can't show this, we're not leaving our full-time jobs. And then after we left, it was in 12 months, we want to be able to do this. And if we haven't done this, then maybe there's no product market fit, things like that.
Right.
And so that series of goal setting is what got me to, you know, being basically almost 4 years into this journey from when the idea came. And in terms of the networking piece, I think for me, the network comes after performance. So I think any good network is really grounded on having really strong performance in whatever you're doing. In R&D, it was really around making sure that I, you know, was contributing at my level or even above my level. And that was really what unlocked the conversations about like, okay, what does Tara want to do next? Like, how can we help develop her? Things like that. And then finally, on the mix of leadership and sort of technical skills, I do believe that having a major like engineering specifically that was really grounded in like first principles and ways of thinking was a really great foundation for me, because it really helped me think about problems differently. It really helped me take an approach to problem solving that I learned, you know, through that curriculum and that coursework. But I don't think I could be where I am today, like as a startup founder and CEO, without the cross-functional experience that I had with running a business. Because especially if there are any like solo founders out there, I have so much respect for solo founders. I don't know how they do it. But making sure that I could wear multiple hats gave me the courage to be able to go and try something without feeling like I was so dependent on anybody else or any other function to bring something across the finish line.
Yeah, there's a lot there. That's the first time I've ever heard of networking. You said any good network is grounded in strong performance in what you do. I think for me, the farther I've gotten into my like entrepreneurship journey, the more I actually kind of want to spend more time, like kind of going deep. Like I'm a generalist as well. I'd probably definitely would put myself in that category. But there are elements of like needing to kind of specialize in something or go like deep in an industry or like actually really take the time to learn something, whether that's marketing for some folks, brand management for some folks, where that's a very specific type of like technology or what have you. For me right now, it's like single tenant commercial real estate, right? And like currently like working this gig in Charlotte with a strong brand to like learn like this whole like landscape, right? Just like pivoting from like healthcare, which was like, hey, this is not a good fit for me. This is really what I want to do. I got to spend some time doing this and doing that. It kind of sounds like you had opportunities to do that in J&J. You had this really cool opportunity at the end, which you're, I think, the third or fourth founder we've talked to that's actually like had this experience where they were able to like create stuff inside of the larger company that they were at or within like the venture capital firm. And then it's like, cool, now I feel comfortable being able to like jump and go do this idea or this thing or latch myself onto this company that's a rocket ship. How do you think about having some expertise, or like actually like really knowing, hey, this is the problem that I'm solving. Like, I'm not going to go start a company for starting a company's sake because I want to be an entrepreneur and I trust my ability to figure it out. But like, you only start the company because I have to start this company. Like Sam Altman, like kind of famously says, don't start a startup unless you actually have to start a startup because it's too hard. Like Steve Jobs says something similar, like with the creation of Apple, just needing to be passionate about it. Like, how was that for you? How do you think about it?
I guess for me, I think there were like a few different things in there, but on the specialization front and kind of going deep, for me, the most important thing that you can do is finish something you start. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people. To like actually have a vision, have a strategy, like take the first few steps and just like finish it. I'm a really strong believer in trying as much as you can. And like, I believe that 5 failed experiments is better than 1 really strong hypothesis. Just like go and try it. So for me, I think the key to like specialization is not so much about going deep for a long, long time. It's about setting out and like activating and like getting to a market and figuring it out. And then very quickly learning from it. So as an example, at J&J, I spent time in the sanitary protection category working on women's health, which I loved because it was an extremely general role. You know, it wasn't very well resourced. It wasn't a high priority for the business, but I got to wear a lot of hats. You know, I was doing claims, I was doing quality, I was doing upstream R&D, I was doing pipeline development. When I went to skincare, it was very siloed because it was very well resourced and every role was extremely specific. So in skincare, I was working on developing anti-aging technologies for 3 brands, and I was basically doing the technology screening, and then I would pass it along to the product developer. And I raised my hand to go back to SanPro, sanitary protection, which some people said would be like a career limiting move. Like, why are you going to a dying category, all of these things. But for me, it was really around being that generalist and getting as many experiences as possible in different types of roles. So I think it's more around understanding kind of who you are and what drives you, and then setting yourself up to get the experiences that you think will get you to the next level, versus saying like, oh, I need to do this for 3 years, I need to do this for 4 years, and then I'm going to be good. Because I think we also alluded to it earlier, like who could predict what's going to happen in 3 years from now? Like from stool tech to autonomous vehicles, you know? So for me, it's really around making sure that you're thinking about a strategic path towards getting to where you want to go and just trying a ton of things. I personally feel like I've gained the most from the experiences that I didn't like, because I learned more, like I learned a lot about myself, or the experiences that other people would say like weren't successes, like trying to go to law school.
Well, Tara, I also find it so interesting. I mean, this idea of where you chose to focus. There's this huge theme that's I'm hearing around just the power of side hustles and everything that you do outside the 9 to 5. But there's also something that's really interesting here on like grit and overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
So you mentioned first generation college grad, woman engineer, scientist, interested in more than just R&D. You've been breaking through to kind of these transition points and like kind of leveling up throughout your career. So how do you think about just this idea of A, like obstacles you've overcome and how you managed to do it, B, how others should approach that? Like, what have you kind of learned through all those transitions?
That's a really good question. I guess the first thing I'll say is that like it's really easy to look back on something and see a pattern, but it's really hard to look forward and create the pattern. So for me, you know, going through it stepwise, I think it all becomes like a risk versus reward conversation with yourself. So for me, you know, we talked about why I chose engineering in terms of why I went from R&D to marketing. Even though it was like a very rare path, for me, it felt like the right thing to do because of the questions that I had. I found myself in meetings, in cross-functional meetings, asking questions about like, how is this being commercialized? How are we choosing the price? Like, how do we choose, what claims to put on the package? And again, because of the performance that I had, I was then invited to do stretch assignments in marketing and try things and take on more work. And I think the grit piece is important because I was willing to take on like literally an extra part-time job at J&J, like with a marketing hat on, writing concepts. I wasn't like getting paid more. I wasn't like, there wasn't like an official title, right?
Yeah.
But I was doing those things because I wanted to learn. And then in similar fashion, when I was sort of obsessed with this idea for pets, I wasn't getting paid. There was no external validation of it. It was literally because I wanted to understand like how I could make an impact in this space. So I do think it's like part grit. And I think the other piece is like figuring out a problem that you literally are willing to obsess over. And that means losing sleep, not hanging out with your family, not seeing your husband, not seeing your son. What do you care so much about in the world that you'd be willing to kind of give up that much time to find the answer to?
Interesting. And Dara, what do you think is the toughest kind of inflection point or obstacle that you've encountered now founding a company?
The biggest obstacle, I think for me, it's reacting to all of the forces that you can't control. So we launched, I left Johnson & Johnson in June of 2019, and we all know what happened in February, March of 2020. No one could have predicted that. I mean, people predicted it, but no one could have. So that was definitely a force that was outside of our control. I think some other things include just changing market dynamics that, we might be able to foresee, but we can't necessarily control. And so being able to be agile as a startup to those market forces and also keeping the team engaged, keeping yourself engaged, making sure that the company stays afloat is probably just the biggest general like macro challenge. And I think for us, the way that we've done it is literally like just keep swimming. So like follow the revenue, follow the users, make sure that we're incorporating feedback. And I'd say that 3 years into the journey, we're still trying to figure out a lot, and I'm really proud of us for continuing down this journey, following the users where they are and meeting their needs. And honestly, what gets me excited is if we had stuck to our original path, our impact would have been so much more limited than it is now. Now we're partnering with all these amazing companies and brands who have millions of users, and we're really touching their lives. So that's what gets me excited, is really leveraging technology in a way that has true value out in the marketplace. And I don't care if it's like a Dig Labs branded thing. What matters to me is that we're helping patients, or we're helping users, or we're helping pet parents in the middle of the night when they don't know what to do, and democratizing access to technology, essentially.
What's been like the most unexpected like application of your technology as it relates to how it's like used like now at the enterprise level, or if you found out it's got a really cool application to it?
I wouldn't say it's unexpected, but one thing that's really cool is seeing how once we have a use case at a company that has multiple brands and multiple categories, how quickly they're able to figure out like different use cases. So for example, within like a CPG company, if it has laundry care and cat care, for example, like seeing parallels in those in those types of use cases has been really rewarding for me, because that's always been the vision and kind of where we want to take it. I personally feel like this technology is still being so under leveraged. So my goal in the next year is to see like how far we can push the boundaries of where we can apply it. And that's why we're really active on the B2B front right now, trying to find as many partners and use cases as makes sense. Because I really do believe that these types of approaches are what's going to change the way that brands interact with their users and consumers, and also change the way that R&D is conducted.
Yeah, I like your strategy. We did that at Holden as well. That's kind of where we went B2B, that kind of flood in users, because it was easier to convince one or two people in a company to say yes and then deliver a product. And then basically when we like set up the product and started engaging with the users, it was like too much information. So then it was like a whole different problem of figuring out how to synthesize the data and like apply it. So and that business ended up pivoting, and it sounds like you're like going through the same strategy. It'll be super, super curious to see how it works out for you over the next year. I'm really excited to see it.
Oh, me too. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I think the biggest personal challenge in this journey has been being not at a big company. And what I mean by that is corporate community, corporate culture, and the vast benefit of resources. So I don't think I actually understood how lonely it would be on this journey, candidly. And that was also exacerbated by COVID, of course, where, no one was going anywhere. So that was personally pretty tough for me. So things that have been really helpful have been continuing my mentorship. So I love mentoring all kinds of startup founders, and especially founders that are women or from underrepresented groups. So I have, a bunch of mentorship opportunities that I'm personally very, very excited to continue leading. And then joining other affinity groups such as Dreamers and Doers, which is a curated platform to really surround myself with like-minded women who are going through similar personal and professional journeys. So that's kind of how I combated it. And also going into New York more regularly since I'm not that far away. But I'd say that it has been a lot of effort. And it was something that I didn't actually expect to need to spend so much time on to make sure that I could operate like at my best and at my highest level.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So Tara, what's the vision? Like, what do you want for Dig Labs to become?
I really want Dig Labs to become the engine that powers visual insights for brands and companies, and ultimately, like I said, really helping to provide better data faster for people to make better decisions about their health and the health of the people or the pets that they care about.
I love that. So if you guys transition into like human kind of applications, and it sounds like you already are, right, and starting to build that framework, does it totally change your business model to like a regulated FDA approved one, or are you like figuring that out as we speak?
Yeah, we're figuring that out. I think honestly the other thing that's important to remember is the FDA is only in the United States.
Sure.
So I think, again, putting a startup hat on, right? There are a lot of ways to test product market fit without needing to go full tilt into like a full regulatory environment.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're thinking through right now. And those are the kinds of partners we're really looking for. I also think that starting in animal health is a great predicate because, as you know, drug discovery and pharmaceuticals are also following a preclinical style model. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that we were excited to start with pets as well. But more to come on that. Yeah.
That's really exciting. I know it's, you're really latching onto a tidal wave of technology and just market forces that sound like it's really just a wealth of opportunity for Dig and for you and your team. And so with in kind of closing, what are some of the advice that you share with these kind of women and underrepresented founders that you think would be really good for our viewers and listeners to hear as well?
I think one piece of advice is to find a community. I wish I kind of did that sooner, honestly. And I wish I spent more time on it because I think that there's so much we can learn from each other. Like one of the reasons I love mentoring is because I learn so much from my mentees. And I really mean that, because the startup pace is so fast that things change so quickly. So advice that I would have given myself 3 years ago is probably not even the best advice today. So I would say staying relevant, finding a community, and then finding and surrounding yourself with the right team. That would probably be my biggest piece of feedback because it's really hard to do anything alone. And I firmly believe in like the power of the collective effort.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been such a pleasure, Tara. Thank you so much for coming on, and excited to spotlight Dig and everything that you've done and where you're heading.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you guys.